Josiah is right. Josiah is right.
Who's the guy in the Mega Man sweatshirt?
He's Josiah, the YouTuber. Julius is right.
Josiah is right. Josiah is right.
The PowerCon exclusive Masters of the Universe inspired Josiah is Right trading card set. You're doomed, PowerCon.
Oh yeah. Penny and Prim are here.
Josiah is right.
Now I'm the power.
The Josiah is Right Masters of the Universe inspired card collection is available exclusively at PowerCon. Actual cards are trading card size. From Josiah is Right.
How long do you want this intro to be? Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Might be the best part. We
It
don't
probably
know.
will be the best part, I'm sure.
Do you cut these things if you're like mid sentence and all of a sudden you're like humming. Who's our audience?
My mom. That's not even a joke. It's like true.
Okay, so I have I guess you start, right?
Well, this is just like a conversation between us. So this is as if we're just capturing us in a moment in our lives.
So you'd say we've actually begun then.
Oh yeah, this is for real. This is happening.
I was waiting for the 3, 2, 1 and like some really amazing sound.
Well, that'll come after the introduction. Like the jingle, which doesn't exist yet because this is the first one of these.
We're pre-jingle.
Yeah, pre-jingle. You know, the little snappy music and clips of Scranton, Pennsylvania.
I always prefer to be pre-jingle.
Pre-jingle, yeah.
Once the jingles come, it's just it's so professional.
It's all downhill from there.
This is raw.
It is. Well,
much like what I'm expecting this movie to be.
You'll feel exposed, hopefully in good ways.
Do we know what the budget is of this film?
We did. Well, I don't know what the budget is, but kind of infamously, the budget was cut in half at one point in production. So it was financed by Mattel and Canon Films, and Mattel put up their part of the money, and Canon Films, they did not. So there are certain things we'll talk about once you see it that affect that
So
are
it's
very
shot,
apparent.
It's shot in 8:9. We only see half. They couldn't afford the other half of the image.
It was shot on a cell phone, but this is 1986 or 7, whatever it was. So it was one of those old box like Zach Morris phones. So
Which was $1,000.
with video, I can imagine what that would have cost back then. It was probably still attached to a car.
Hold on, I'm looking up the budget. It was much too little. Well, this is going to be interesting.
But I love this film, and and that's an unironic statement. I just want to make that clear. It's definitely the nostalgia goggles for me. It just hit at the right time. You're a slightly older He-Man fan than I, so maybe for you it's more wounding, but for me it worked.
And I'm not quite sure.
I was 5 when I saw this in the theater.
Do we have any idea if I didn't see it in the theater? Maybe I did see it in the theater. It would make sense that I probably would have begged to go see it. At that time in 1987, when would you have had another opportunity to see a movie? VHS?
VHS for us. We had a relative that my dad's second cousin or something that owned a video store, Christoph's Video Magic in Russellton, Pennsylvania. So like the small local video store. So we'd get everything free. So we could get all our rentals for free, but that was how we would see things through the video store. I don't think we had, at that time we might have had cable, but there was a chunk of my adolescence where we didn't have cable, but that might have been when we moved and stuff.
I'm seeming to remember early memories of the home box office logo in my house. And so there's a chance, and I just really don't know, there's a chance I saw this on the small screen, which could also affect what you'll find is a negative memory.
Totally. Because imagine I was 5 and I saw this in a theater as a 5-year-old
versus maybe an 8-year-old seeing it the following year on home box office.
Exactly.
I don't recall seeing this in the theater, but I also couldn't really tell you which movies in general I saw in the theater. I know my mom had a great collection of VHSs that she would record off of, the movie channels. And I don't think this was one of them. Maybe it was, but what I will say is that 2 words come to mind when I think of this movie, and those words are not good.
They're actually not good, or the words you're about to say are not good?
The words themselves
or is that a description of the words?
Which negates the word good. Yeah. Good by itself would be fine, but the word not in front of things cancels it, and therefore it becomes negative.
Yes, I understand the function of the word. Just wanted clarity on the fact that those are the words.
Those are the 2 words.
I wouldn't say by any means this is a great movie, but I think it's a good movie. So I think good might be an adequate word for this. Not much beyond good.
And I'm interested in revising my point of view, but the age at which you're watching anything really affects your perception.
So you're saying right? You're too old and bitter to like this movie anymore?
Yeah, I might be.
Is that what happens when you turn 40?
That's right. Also, for the past, I'd say 10 to 15 years, I've been waiting for what I've always had in my head, the term a proper He-Man movie.
Yes, and they've been trying to make it for as long as that. And
it was in the trades in like 2006, I remember. This is happening. We're looking for
Josh
knew to do this. We need
our close buddy Josh. He knew someone who was writing one of the screenplays forever ago, like around that time, like that long ago.
Well, so that brings me to some of the points that are going to come up. But what I want to also say, my other memory, and I don't have a lot of memories of this thing, is
this thing.
Them feeling the need to introduce some, like, what I would call maybe like a fuzzy brown dust bunny character that wasn't in the animated show. That's perhaps completely out of left field and unnecessary. And I'm going to find out.
It's a movie made by a toy company, though. Sure, they want to make new toys too.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's
a double-edged sword on that one. When one of the guys had lots of swords, but I think he was really cool. As a kid, he was like my favorite, one of the bad guys, Blade. But
please tell me I'm
being like, I'm over here like justifying things through the eyes of a toy company right now. Like, oh, it's okay because they needed to sell me toys. For me, it worked. Actually, I don't even know if I had a lot of the movie toys, to be honest. I remember my cousins had them because they were at my grandma's house.
The character has like a horrific nose of some. Am I thinking of
horrific nose? I'm not sure. I mean,
I might be merging this character
like
with some other fantasy character.
Steve Martin in that 90s like version of Cyrano de Bergerac, whatever it is, the Roxanne.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing.
It's that is part of the He-Man movie,
but merged with critters. That's what I'm picturing, but brown.
A little bit.
Yeah. So, but those are my memories, and so earlier my wife said, "How long is this movie?" And so I went on IMDb and I looked, and it looks like it's about an hour and 3/4. and I saw the poster, and the poster brought up all kinds of interesting questions for me. I didn't recall, I see He-Man standing above a city skyline, and that brings about some trepidation because I am firmly against dinosaurs coming to a city, Smurfs coming to a city, pretty much any storyline where they feel like they need to have the characters come to New York, I'm pretty much against.
Well, they definitely don't go to New York.
Okay, so
they go to like Rancho Cucamonga or some random, Southern California city.
But the poster maker didn't get that note.
You know who the poster maker was?
Who?
Drew Struzan.
Really?
Yes.
It's not very Struzan-y.
Unless it's like a photographic one that is on IMDb.
This is a photographic.
Okay, look at the real one though. It's beautiful art, as always.
Okay. I see a painting. Yes, that one excites me a lot more, and it's not surprising.
And it's not as reflective of the movie.
Right.
That was probably way more accurate.
Yeah, which he was like, let me do my thing, right? Mm-hmm. No, I'm looking at one that I see a young girl in a jean jacket.
Courtney Cox
playing with some tube that has sparkles on it.
Cosmic key.
And it just worries me.
Those are all, well, not all of them are awesome things, but some of them are kind of cool things.
I just want it to be a movie in Eternia.
Yeah, well, that's one of the not first problems, but 15 minutes in, that's a problem you'll encounter pretty quickly.
And I wonder if that's budgetary too. It's like you can't do a whole movie.
I'm sure it was, yeah.
Fantasy in 1987. I mean, that was hard. I mean, they don't have all the visual effects they have now. So,
well, I mean, Star Wars was a decade old at that point, so I think they could have figured it out.
Yeah, I suppose.
And particularly the first Star Wars, the budget wasn't huge on that by any means. And this movie does a lot to copy Star Wars too.
Oh, God. Okay, so now it's.
So now I'm kind of like I'm starting to get
a little excited, but
there's things to enjoy. There's things to criticize. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch. I don't want to oversell it, but I do think it's better by far than its reputation. I think it's like a movie that gets hate and it doesn't deserve hate. Because you understand the filmmaking process and all those things. So you understand those restrictions and you kind of have to like think within those restrictions, what they're able to achieve. And I think they do pretty good. And then knowing what I said about like the beginning with losing half of your fund, I don't know if it was half, but losing a huge chunk of your funding when the actual people making the film don't fund their part of the film, that
could be limiting.
Yeah, it could have been, should have been maybe way more disastrous than it is. So therefore it's good. But I'm not judging it on those standards. I'm saying those are the standards I hope you judge it on. I'm judging it on a 5-year-old who just loved this movie in the theater when I saw it with my brothers and my nanny. I remember I posted on Facebook a while ago how I thought I saw it with my mom, and my oldest brother corrected me that it was with our grandma, who we called Nanny. So just props to him for setting me straight.
I'm probably going to judge it on my ability to stay awake. It's likely. So as I was going through this poster, so I initially saw the city skyline, and I was like, maybe I'm misinterpreting this. And then my eyes went up to the log line. A battle fought in the stars now comes to Earth. And I was like, oh boy, they're doing exactly what I was fearing. And then my eyes went down lower to the Masters of the Universe typography, which is actually really nice, and is a nice homage to the way it should be written from the animation. Because as a fan of the animated series, and more so, even it's not like I sit and rewatch that a ton. I love the toys. I love the character. I love the whole mystique of it. But the more faithful things are going to be to that perfect, image of this franchise, the more I'm going to like it. So, but I think that will be the next movie. I'm
The
a
one
little
that'll get
worried,
made in like 2057.
and then I won't remember any of it.
Your grandkids will love it though.
They'll go, "This is dumb." I'm also, looking at this poster, and he's got a gun. He-Man's got a gun. I don't know why He-Man needs a gun. Sword would be good and enough.
He has a sword too.
Yeah, and they felt the need to change all the costumes, and Skeletor looks like an old bag of potato chips. I'm just
Best thing in the movie, Skeletor. Like seriously.
I'm a little worried. I do think that the thing that I'm excited about, which I would have never been excited about as a child, is the cast. And that's because of who Frank Langella, the roles he's been in since, and how amazing of an actor is, and all the other things I've seen her. And so I'm kind of excited about that. And then, at the time, who was Courtney Cox? Nobody. So
she was, at that point, she had done the Bruce Springsteen video for Dancing with the Dark, where he like pulls her up on stage, and it's like this awkward, like the way I would dance, or like a little bit of Elaine Bennis dance, that kind of thing. That was her claim to fame at that point.
So it's exciting to get to, see these people in these roles. And then also on the poster, I saw that there's somebody named Christina Pickles, and that's just a great name. So I got to look up who Christina Pickles is.
I'm not sure who that one is, so.
But that would be on the short list of last names if I was going to change my name to have like a stage name. I'd be Bryan Pickles.
Or Pickles Langer, I think.
I like Pickles Langer.
Hey, it's Pickles Langer.
When I was in like third grade, I think the clown who came to my birthday party was Pickles the Clown.
That sounds like a terrifying birthday party.
Yeah.
The one where everyone around me got murdered that birthday?
The video was destroyed. It was too scary.
I have one more thing for you.
Yes.
We're recording this, hopefully to get it posted in time for PowerCon, which I will be at. So hopefully this video will be up shortly before that, or if not, shortly after that. But at the last PowerCon, I got concept art from Mark Taylor, one of the creators of He-Man, prints. And so I've had one for Bryan since that point. Signed to Bryan Pickles right there.
Oh my god.
This is one of the characters. This is Face Shifter.
Wow. And who did Face Shifter become?
Manny Faces. So this is an early concept of what that character became. So that's what you see here. And you can see like it was a little bit different, but kind of different heads and faces that are kind of more drastic than what you'd end up seeing in the character, because you have the combination of a design plus what works as a toy. So
but I do see some of the inspiration in the chest piece and the torso. There was a character whose head shot up.
Yeah.
That breastplate was used a lot for maybe like Stinkor and Stratos maybe. And once they use those molds for the bodies in particular, right, it was reuse. The boots. They all shopped at the same Buster Brown shoe shop.
Yeah.
Which color would you like? Blue, brown, red. And the face to the left reminds me a little bit of Merman.
That one.
Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic.
So, but this is I've had since it'll be 2 years now because there was no PowerCon last year, and this coming PowerCon, it was 2 years ago pretty much now as we were recording this. This is very end of August, and this PowerCon will be September, so it's pretty much 2 years I've had this, and I've been hoping to frame it and give it to you as a gift, but we haven't seen each other in person. That just sums up how long it's been since we actually physically hung out together.
Well, I actually haven't seen anybody in that long.
That's true, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm excited for that.
So there's that.
You can view that artwork on Josiah's Instagram.
Yes,
and
I'll share that one now. Yeah, check out. I'll share it now as we record this, just because, and I'll share it again at the time of this being posted. So Josiah is right, the same as the YouTube channel that this is on. WRITE as in writer, not as in I am correct, because as Bryan knows, I'm rarely correct,
especially when it comes to writing letters.
But I am right. Yes,
Josiah is sometimes right.
Very occasionally. Autocorrect is not my friend because my spelling is so off that autocorrect then sends it in some really ridiculous direction. But that's it.
3, 2, 1, special noise.
Hello and welcome to Josiah is Right About Film. This is a new show I'm doing. It's a podcast inspired by my former one, Popmosis, which I did with my buddies Tyler and Paul. So thanks to them, we decided to stop doing that. So I wanted to keep talking about movies, so I'm doing one on my own. And I really wanted to talk about this movie for a long time. This particular film, Masters of the Universe, was the reason I wanted to do that podcast. It was the first film I wanted to do, and I'd wanted to do it forever. And PowerCon is coming up. We're going to record this. This is at very end of August. PowerCon is basically 2 weeks from when we're recording this, so I'll get this edited and up for you guys before then. So come see me at PowerCon. You can get one of, or possibly all of, my special Josiah is Right trading cards. So there's Josiah, there's Judy, there's Penny, there's Prim. No, that's Akira. That's the dog. I skipped my other daughter. There's Prim. And there's the family. So you can come get all of us. Each one is a numbered. There will only be 250 ever printed of this very special series of collectible cards inspired by the original Master of the Universe, the He-Man cards. There's the front of one. You can just see the inspiration there. And even the back is inspired by the back. There you go. So thanks to Bryan, actually, who was joining me for this episode, my friend Bryan, who I'll introduce properly in 1 second. He also helped me, gave me feedback as I was designing those cards, because he is actually a professional, not just some amateur messing around with some software he doesn't know how to use. So Bryan is an art director, production designer. He worked on Last Man on Earth. I just saw that he worked on Euphoria, which I didn't realize. He worked on Murder in the First, and a long time ago, I was living with a guy named Ian, and Bryan and Ian were friends. And Bryan kind of would hang out with Ian, so I'd see Bryan every now and again. I wasn't so sure about him. We worked on a movie that was a disaster. We will share that story for another time. But I want to say, I want to say that was what made us friends. We went through this very traumatic sort of experience that solidified our friendship in a very short amount of time, and that was closer to 20 years ago now than it wasn't. I've been in California for 19 years now, and so that was maybe less than a year after I've been here. So say hello, Bryan.
Hi. Yeah, film has a way of, when you're in the trenches working on it, the tougher it is, the more it brings you closer to the people or makes you never want to see them again. But not a lot of gray relationships.
And I think that's what I said at the end of that very long night.
I remember that night.
Forever, or we're never going to talk again.
We were standing in the cul-de-sac of my driveway, and we were trying to figure out what to do with a truck full of stuff. The night I decided not to continue on the show, and I believe the battery on the truck died. And the battery on the truck died, and Josiah said to me, "This is either gonna mean we're great friends from here on out, or this is the last night we ever talk to each other." And I'm glad it went the way that it did, because now I'm here on a podcast.
Yeah, this is the culmination of all that here in this.
It was actually the reason I've been wanting to be friends.
And obviously Bryan's expertise is in just our friendship is why I want him on this. But this particular episode is because of Masters of the Universe. Bryan is a big He-Man fan, not necessarily of the film we're going to talk about. So first, I'm going to give you kind of a rundown on the movie, who made it, whatnot. So Masters of the Universe released August 7th, 1987. I saw it in the theater, and we'll talk more about that later. Directed by Gary Goddard, not Goddard. I know he's not that Goddard. Gary Goddard, who did a lot of, like, he did the Captain Power show. Did you ever see that, Bryan, in the late 80s? Like Captain Power, it was very short-lived, but it was like a video game type. It was like live action. If you were to see that, you'd see the connection to this that's there. He also did a lot of like Terminator 3D and amusement park 3D things throughout the 90s. His kind of career shifted that way. And I have to mention, he was also, his name came up in the Bryan Singer accusations. So there's like that dark side. I'm not going to say anything, but just, I feel like to just address it at least, because if you Google that stuff, his name's in there. Written by David Odell, who's a Muppet guy who wrote The Dark Crystal. Frank Langella is Skeletor. Dolph Lundgren is He-Man. Meg Foster is Evil Lynn. Billy Barty as Gwildor. And Courtney Cox is Julie. Robert Duncan McNeil is Kevin. And since I'm here with Pickles Langer, I forgot that joke. I was in my notes with Pickles Langer. Christina Pickles plays the sorceress. And it's hilarious that we talked about that in our intro we filmed a few days ago, just sort of previewing things. She's also Courtney Cox's mom on Friends. Yes. So this is Courtney Cox's first move. The woman who plays sorceress would go on to play her mother on the biggest show of the 90s. Probably.
I hope it was part of her deal. I'll take this show, Friends, is it called? As long as I can have the sorceress play my mom eventually on the series.
That was the deal, yeah. It also stars Pig Boy, who is Richard Sponser, who was a contest winner who won like a contest for He-Man be in the Master of the Universe movie. And he's in the movie, like Skeletor like hands him his staff when they go in the Castle Grayskull. So like it's a little Easter egg to watch for. It was produced by Yoram Golbis and Menachem Golan, who are infamous Canon Films, which we'll talk about. It impacts this film. We talked about it briefly in our intro part. The art department, production designer was William Stout, who is most famous for his designs on this film. He's really mostly worked as a conceptual designer if you look at his credits, and that's really what he excels at if you look at his work. Art director was Robert Howland, who I looked up his stuff, and unfortunately he died in 88. So this was basically, I think, his last film. Richard Enlund is the special effects guy, and he goes back to Star Wars. That was his first credit. So this is kind of the people that are maybe responsible or to be held to blame, depending on your point of view. As I've said before, I like this movie. I might even say I love it, but I understand it as a flawed movie. So in our little preamble piece that we recorded a few days ago, Bryan's words to describe it were not good. And I said, well, I think it's at least good.
Not good.
Would you hold true to your statement of not and good as your two?
I'm gonna upgrade it.
Okay.
I'm gonna upgrade this movie to not great, which is a big deal for me considering the opinions I had of it.
Yeah.
And I do see what could have captured one at that age.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I'm sort of shocked that it didn't work for me. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
I feel like really early on, I might have also like heard criticism of it that then made me go, yeah, you're right. It is terrible, because it's really no different from all of the other junk that I'm in love with.
Yeah, especially those 80s movies, like that era of movies that we grew up watching on VHS over and over and over again. It's just for whatever reason, it slipped through the cracks for you. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of people.
In fact, it not is it like those movies, it is those other movies.
Yes.
There are pieces of every other 80s movie in there, in an attempt, I think, to appeal to all of those other people. Well, let's take a little bit of this off of that menu, and
maybe to a problematic degree, but at the same time, you can see what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and I think in general with filmmaking, setting out to make what you want to make that is its own thing typically works better than trying to make something that
ticks the boxes of other things you've seen.
And we talked about a little bit the I was sort of defending choices from the point of view of the toy company, and that's where things start to get problematic in terms of checking the boxes, right? Gary Goddard, he wanted to make a film that was a tribute to Jack Kirby, the comic book artist, and specifically like New Gods. Those comics in particular had a big influence here, and if you read those comics, you can see, and those comics had an influence on Star Wars, and there's a lot of Star Wars in this movie, or in its attempts at Star Wars, and you can really see that in this film. The Skeletor, the good guy, bad guy, very simple, good versus evil kind of dynamic. And that's what he wanted. That's his vision for it. But then you have the producers who are like, let's make this as cheaply as possible. And then you have the toy company who is like, here is our list of demands and restrictions and things like that. For example, He-Man couldn't actually kill people. That's why you have those black stormtroopers that are robots, because couldn't have him kill anyone. So those kind of things, I'm sure there were other restrictions that I'm not aware of, but that here's boxes to check while you're still trying to have your own unique vision for a film. And most of the time it's not a successful film most of the time.
And they wanted, because I don't know about this, they wanted to sell new toys in new designs, I assume, going with this. It wasn't an effort to sell the toys from the animated series.
Yeah, exactly. It was my understanding you have to introduce so many new characters to have more new toys on the shelves. So that's why, or at least different looking ones. That was almost like a prerequisite, from what I understand from the toy company's requests.
Well, I think that's pretty evident in the the decision to have Skeletor have an alternate outfit.
Yeah, and I've oddly
that screamed, toy shelf to me.
Yeah, but that's also like that alternate outfit's very Jack Kirby New Gods. The design of it's very in that direction. But the weird thing is they ended up only releasing 3 toys from this film. They released like the Gwildor, Blade, and one of the other bad guys, the lizard guy. I'm forgetting his name. Sauron.
And you shouldn't remember it.
But that guy, it starts with an S. It's like Sauron, something like that.
In addition to He-Man?
I don't think they did a He-Man for the line. If they did, they just produced the old He-Man toy, and maybe the packaging said the movie. And the same with Skeletor. As far as I know, that they didn't even bother to create, retool the characters for the new design. But I can't speak to that. So let's start talking about the actual movie, because we need to complain about that and celebrate that. Or the film starts out quite awesome. It starts out with these epic shots, and it's this really dramatic narration, and you see Eternia, and you see the castle, and these great matte shots, very 80s, like the epitome of 80s filmmaking before digital effects would take over everything just a few years after this. And then Skeletor bursts in the Castle Grayskull. That's the beginning of the movie, and that's when he hands the thing to the pig boy. I'm pretty sure that's when that happens.
No, God!
But regardless, he comes in, Skeletor has just won the war. He has won Castle Grayskull. And rewatching this, my first thought was, that was the movie I wanted to see.
Right.
That's the movie. I want to see how that happened.
We pick up just after what you were interested in.
Yes.
Yes, after this very 80s psychedelic Superman-esque title sequence, with music that is in the whole John Williams knockoff. Hey John, will you do this movie? No, okay, we'll just make it sound like this title sequence was yours.
You know who did the music though? Bill Conti.
Yeah, Bill Conti.
Rocky.
Bill Conti is the real deal.
Yeah, and the music. You
have to believe they wanted John Williams first.
No, and the music's good, but it's definitely derivative of Williams. Yes. It's a really good score, but it's clear what we want this to sound like that.
And we know that Bill Conti has talent. And in fact, he might be the most talented person who worked on this film.
So what are your thoughts on the Eternia sequences? As I know you're a fan of the show, and sort of you described the being a fan of the mystique of the show and the character, and all, I should say less not show, but more the toys. As am I. Like I liked the show, enjoyed it, but the toys were really what was. I would take those toys and tell my own stories. The action figures were my first storytelling tools, and these were some of my first action figures, He-Man ones.
Well, I'm always looking at the design, and they made interesting decisions. The terrain of Eternia in the animated sequences was always, if you can tell from a background cell that's He-Man, that's Eternia. And so one thing they attempted to do, I looked up the filming location because it was like, this looks familiar, is they did shoot at Vasquez Rocks.
Okay.
Out past Santa Clarita. And it's great, right? But there's not enough of it. When you go to the inside of Castle Grayskull, in these sequences where we see Skeletor, all of a sudden it all becomes just so angular, and it's like this new vision of what Eternia looks like, and to me it doesn't land with how I see Eternia. It's just this much more modern faux finish disaster of a set that sort of screams of maybe a lack of budget. More, either they're trying to set themselves apart or they're trying to save money. But
I think the problem is, I think it's both.
Yeah,
that's the thing, because that's a huge set. That's a huge set. Like they have these. One thing about it is these great wide shots, and it's full of people. They
one of them.
Yeah,
and that's part of the problem. I want more Eternia.
No, totally. But just like as you were saying, like the backgrounds on the cards,
exactly.
What I did was when I made these, I went and grabbed different, screen grabs of backgrounds and like those spikes and those things that make it unique. And they have
organic.
Yeah, organic, exactly. And like you said, you didn't get enough of that world. You had part of it is the fact that it doesn't take place in that world. But even when you're there, what you see is just it's all that desert rock, as opposed to the diversity of the landscape that you would get in the show. You get a lot of different. I mean, sure, they would reuse those backgrounds, but the 10 backgrounds they had were all very distinct. So.
Oh man, and the one you just showed on your card with those spikes coming out of the sides of caves. I mean, that's so iconically, He-Man background. And where was that? I wanted that. But,
so what do you think, while we're on the design, what do you think of the design of the exterior of Castle Grayskull in the movie?
That I liked.
I did too. I liked it a lot.
It left me wanting more of that, not more of something else. I'm like, I got one matte painting of it, and I did like the design of that because it was gritty, and it had, but it doesn't match the interior.
That's the thing. Exactly. Yeah.
The interior,
because that looks like something that was like formed out of something that happened, as opposed to when you go inside, it looks like something that people made.
Yeah. And that's, left hand and right hand, maybe not, talking to each other or shaking. But look, I've made enough visuals for shows to know that everything is done with restriction. And it's our job as art department to hide that as much as possible. And there were parts of this where it feels like this is the best we're going to be able to do, and almost had a sense of humor about it. I wonder, it's also the late 80s. Standards were different, for visuals, but what I found to be interesting about this is that this 1987 film is strikingly visually similar to a 90s television series where the budgets are very low, but you could see just in like 4 or 5 years that they can do all of this for television, which doesn't say a whole lot for the aesthetic of this film.
it just the development of the process where they could do how far like compositing and things came, and that was like a repackaged of a Japanese show, but then they eventually shot them here, I think. But they probably shot like, it's because you know how it is. You're in Southern California, like there's the weird rocks over there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Like, exactly. Gotta go to everybody's got to go there.
Well, you're right, and maybe
and Southern California doesn't unfortunately have the most diverse landscape. You know, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and before I came here, I didn't realize how every movie looks like. I can spot LA in every movie when it's posing as New York. It doesn't matter. Downtown LA, I know what downtown looks like, but the landscapes, the way the vegetation is, the trees, when it's supposed to be a foresty sequence, it's taking place somewhere in the Midwest or something. You're like, yeah, they filmed that up somewhere near, you know, the like Fox used to have their like ranch where they film like Planet of the Apes and everything. It's that kind of setting.
There's a lot of diversity for a single place, but it's all within a scope.
Yeah.
But it's a much wider scope than many other places in this country, which is why early Hollywood worked, and they could do jungle movies, and they could do Westerns, and they could do space, and they could do all of these different things here. And they may not look like the real thing, but at least you can pull different looks out of LA, because LA is a mess. So Skeletor enters immediately. I'm like, stormtroopers.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, hold on. I thought I put on Masters of the Universe, and I checked the guide, and I wasn't watching Star Wars. I was watching Masters of the Universe. But you know, as they get into some of these other places outside of Eternia, I'm like, we're in Mad Max. And it's really interesting because that very raw look works now. Like, they could make a movie in that world now very successfully, where they're like, everything is sort of post apocalyptic, like destruction. Like, visual storytellers know how to do that look now. In the 80s, in this movie, it just looks like we ran around in a bunch of alleys.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because there was a planned sequel that they were developing, and from what I've understood, the script was essentially a post-apocalyptic. Have you ever seen the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Cyborg? The low budget, sort of the dystopian, like maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Is that our next one?
It could be. Again, I liked it as a kid, but I don't know if that one hold up for me.
Cyborg. I like that it has Psy in it.
That film was apparently, the early drafts were going to be the He-Man sequel, and they just redeveloped it so they could make something else, because it was going to be a lower budget sequel filmed with that style, using that wasteland sort of aesthetic. That they were going to go fully with that. I think they realized, oh, there's something here. If nothing else, that was what could have made the movie more unique, because then you have that problem, and it's an 80s cliche problem. Sometimes it's done in a good way, like Monster Squad, I think, is a really good example, where you have suburbia, the monsters come. Last Starfighter, I think, is an okay example too, where it's suburbia, like, but again, like Southern California, these are all things that clearly look like Southern California now to me, but as a kid in the 80s, it was middle America. Even E.T., these things coming to suburbia, kind of E.T. started it, all these things coming to Earth in a weird way. And then, I mean, we know the budgetary restrictions, but part of the problem is it's less about the budget and more about, you seem like 5 other movies that came out in the last couple of years.
And I think there's a difference between how can we make a Masters of the Universe movie for $1 versus it's a story about an alien that comes down and lives with a child, which is that's a good story. Or Last Starfighter, where we need to get somebody from Earth. You know, this movie and some of the other ones where it's driven by the budget, it's just like, oh, well, we can't do Eternia, so how can we do the story in Los Angeles?
Yeah. because I was thinking, oh, what's another example? Like Never Ending Story, but that one's almost a reverse where the Earth is the framing device, and then most of it happens in the world. Whatever the
And
world
what
is.
year was that?
What's that?
What year was that?
That was maybe 83, 84.
Yeah, there's Eternia.
Yeah.
Right? Go look up what those locations were and go shoot it there. Perfect.
And the funny thing is, those two movies are two of my earliest memories in a movie theater. So,
and that movie was one of the ones that I watched until the tape broke.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
So
for the rest of the podcast, we're going to talk about the Never Ending Story
movies that we prefer over this one. Now, I promise, Brian, that we will do. This is like sort of. This is again. It's not it's not a bad movie, but it's so built within limitations and choices that aren't the best choice for the character, and all these different things that hurt what should have been just an awesome adventure film, and it really hurts that because when you just take out He-Man and tell me the plot of this movie, I said, that's a cool, interesting movie. But then when you're like, oh, it's a He-Man movie, it's about this cosmic key and Courtney Cox and all those things. Because I really think even just emotionally in the story beats, all those things hit and they work. The performances, I think, are generally good. And all the Courtney Cox and the guy who plays Kevin, they get way too much screen time, but they also are very believable. Like there's a point in the movie where it's like 15 minutes of no He-Man from pretty much from when they get to Eternia until Courtney Cox runs into him. It's the other characters. You're with you're at the chicken shack. You're at all these other things. And again, I think another limitation was Dolph Lundgren. So I guess we'll talk about that since we're on that topic. Yeah. What do you think of Dolph Lundgren as He-Man?
Well, to your other points, I have this in my notes. Where's He-Man? That's my notes. This is a Skeletor movie.
Yeah.
Skeletor commands the story. And He-Man didn't really even need to be there. I'm not sure what he did to propel the story. And he seems like a bystander in this story. Now, granted, it isn't He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. This is just the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
And I really felt like he was a backseat passenger in this story that's about Gwildor and the Key and Skeletor and Courtney Cox and He-Man just happens to be there. And I didn't find any of his sequences to be terribly powerful. Okay. And I think it's because he just shows up for a moment here and there. Yeah. And I want a He-Man movie.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I said, I kind of gave credit to, and I think Dolph Lundgren's not like, he doesn't deserve any kind of hate, but he doesn't do anything either. He doesn't do anything to like prove he's bad, like so awful that he's just awful, but he doesn't do anything to prove that he is awesome as He-Man.
Yeah, and I didn't see it as being, if I can call him by his first name, Dolph.
I must break you.
I didn't see it as being his acting was a problem. I think it was the utilization of this character in the script.
Victory.
He's, I believe, Swedish. And especially at the time, I know English wasn't as strong as he's coming off of Ivan Drago, basically, right? Connecting the Rocky movies. And here he is as the lead. There's like a joke in, I think it's in the Toys That Made Us show where apparently like Stallone visited the set and he's like, you gave that guy lines? Like that was, I don't know if it's true, but that's like one of the jokes if you watch the Toys That Made Us, which is great. The He-Man episode is probably one of the best ones. But that idea that he couldn't carry, I know he had to read up his own lines to make it more clear. And my thought was, if you look at like Gal Gadot, like for Wonder Woman, they embraced her accent for the character and let that be unique. I don't know if it would work as well with him in having a stronger Swedish accent, because it's not as, to at least the American ear, it's not as quote foreign. When we hear that accent, we probably think Swedish, whereas with Gal Gadot, we think, oh, that's different. I don't know where that comes from.
Where were the buff Americans? We got to get them all on loan. I mean, we got Arnold and Dolph, and I mean,
well, the
Sylvester
sequel.
Stallone's American, and he can't speak.
Yeah.
Totally. So the sequel would actually going to have Laird Hamilton play it, and he was a surfer at the time. So I can imagine you go from a Swedish guy to a surfer dude. I don't know what the dynamic would have been. So he would have been the guy in that post-apocalyptic He-Man because Dolph was done. Apparently, it wasn't a great experience for him, just in different levels. But I always feel like he gets like hate that he doesn't necessarily deserve. But like you really pointed out, and watching it again on this viewing, you can really see it's the first time I've really noticed. He is, like you said, he's a passenger. He disappears again, it's not called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but we all know
we expect it. Who
is Dolph Lundgren is his name's even above Frank Langella. I'm pretty sure he's top billed in this. So it'd be interesting to count screen time to see, but he feels very backseat. And the thing that, watching it as a writer, when I'm seeing it again, I really felt like the emotional story that Courtney Cox in particular had, it works for this film and it carries through. But her interactions and the things that gives her strength, it comes from talking to Tila and Man at Arms, and it comes from talking to Gwildor and things like that. It comes from all these other characters. And He-Man at one point just kind of like hugs her and saves her, but he doesn't like other little moments. Even when Kevin has the thing on his neck, like He-Man should be the one that takes it off. Just little things like that. It's always even the small moments, the other characters always seem to be the one doing things.
Did we ever figure out where this is supposed to be?
It does. I think there's one point watching it where they reference flying to Catalina.
Don't go to Catalina, okay?
So maybe because that's where the parents were going to fly, or they were going to take the boat or something. So it seems like it is acknowledging that it's set in Southern California.
Because I did catch 2 palm trees in the cemetery.
Yeah. I think they were like not hiding that fact, but they didn't want it to be I think that was strategic, where we won't say it outright, but we'll try to shoot it in a way that this could be anywhere. But if a palm tree sneaks in, it is Southern California.
It's incredible that that's where the portal accidentally took them.
That's the way it always goes. That's why aliens are always attacking New York.
What I assume the Main Street must have been, because one of the filming locations was Whittier.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Whittier, but
that's Whittier.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of the smaller cities in Southern California, particularly in Orange County, have that classic American type of Main Street, that Disneyland-esque Main Street. Honestly, I feel like they have the more here than where I come from. I grew up, the first street I lived on was called Main Street, and it looked nothing like these places. I know places where I grew up that are like that, but there's a lot of them in Southern California that are like that classic Main Street. My last place was on a Main Street like that, but that's sort of, I think, what their intention was. This could be anywhere, but we're not going to go bend over backwards to hide the fact that it's California, because a palm tree is going to slip in there inevitably.
That's right. Speaking of Whittier, what line was Whittier then? Woman at Arms. They really slid that one in there. That was fantastic.
Woman at Arms.
I also really enjoyed A Curious Quartet I didn't appreciate those characters themselves. I love that they were referred to as a curious quartet.
So a lot of also the Skeletor lines, Frank Langella came up with a lot of his own stuff.
He's like, this script is terrible. I'm just going to wing it.
Like I was watching it today
and eyeballs.
And there's a line where when he finally has He-Man captured, he's like,
"Tell me about the loneliness of good, He-Man. Is it equal to the loneliness of evil?"
And I thought, wow, that's, deep stuff, Skeletor.
Thank you for that bit of philosophy.
And that's where the movie is. And I think that's been said, you pointed it out, and that's been said multiple times. The problem with this movie, which is also weirdly why it works, is that it's a Skeletor movie. He is so good. So like every moment he's on screen, you want to see more of him. and that's problematic. I mean, you want to have it like the reverse in terms of screen time. I almost feel like with He-Man, you want He-Man to fill that time, that void, like where if you don't see He-Man for 15 minutes, you want something's wrong with the movie. Whereas you don't see Skeletor for 15 minutes, you're aching for more Skeletor because he's so awesome. And it's just
what occurred to me today was the challenge of converting animated Skeletor to a character for live action.
Yeah.
And the fact that they had to add eyeballs within empty sockets. So it's a skeleton of a human that used to have eyes that now has eyes with inside the skeletal holes.
And that considered, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
That's something that when I see it. So I was watching it today with my daughter Penny, and Penny is 4. She's 4.5, as she corrected me the other day. She's 4.5, not 4. But she was watching it, and she I didn't tell her what it was when it was on, but she knew it was He-Man. She goes, "I've never seen Skeletor like that before." I said, "Yeah," because she's seen the cartoon where it looks a certain way. Interesting thing though, Frank Langella, whenever he took the role because he had a kid that's probably about our age that was a fan of He-Man, and that's why he wanted to do it. He did it just when they offered it to him, because this is my gift to my kid to get to do this movie. And he, at the time, he said he was really good, in good shape, and he was really fit. So he was ready to be in something that was much more revealing, to show his musculature, his physique, as Skeletor was in the cartoon and the toys, that just like He-Man, Skeletor is buff with a skeleton face. So that was his intention. And then they put all these, and I think it looks cool.
And they hit it.
Yeah, that's the problem. And it looks cool. The design, I think, of his costume is a cool costume, but it is then, okay, he's got a hood. He's the Emperor from Star Wars, and the nature of the character kind of is Darth Vader-y. And again, another Star Wars that thing. One thing like I liked about this movie is like the long flowing capes and stuff, that the costuming, they really, where they spent some of the money, you can really see it when you put your money on screen. I think that's always a good thing in a movie like this, where then I read like things, everybody's costume weighed like 50 pounds. Like Dolph Lundgren said, that sword was gigantic and heavy, plus the cape, so he could barely move in it, and all these different things. But at least you see it there. But at the same time, certain characters don't look enough like what you want them to look like. I understand introducing some new characters, but for example, you talked about the Dust Bunny Beast Man.
So who I was referring to for the Dust Bunny was what turned out to be Gwildor.
Oh, Gwildor. Oh, I thought you met Beastman.
No.
When I realized when when we talked about it, you mentioned something with a weird nose, and I was like, I gave you like a weird look, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I forget Gwildor has an enormous nose? Now it's on me.
I had this recollection of this fuzzy reddish brown. I wouldn't even know what to call that thing. With an Oreo. And that was Gwildor. And, so they invented a character that was a big part. But these henchmen that they put together, one of them was Predator. One of them was like Sloppy Beast Man.
Yeah. And he's the only one that was directly from a toy, was that Beast Man. He was just the movie version of Beast Man. And then I kind of wish, like, it's interesting. You have He-Man, Tila, Man-at-Arms. Those are like the 3 main characters for the good guys that you'd want to see, I think. I feel like you have Skeletor, you have Evelyn, but I feel like for the henchmen, you should have it split somehow. 2, like, man, one, 2 of like 2 guys, and then introduce 2 new guys.
Instead of, Trapjaw or Whiplash or any of these other amazing, they had so many that they could pick from. You have like Tuna Can Man and like Dried Prune Face Man,
Commander Karg, and they look great.
They look terrible.
No, they look great. I think they look great. No, but I don't care about.
One of them was a Shredder ripoff. I know that Ninja Turtles hadn't come out yet, so they must rip them off from the cartoon.
Well, the comics existed, so maybe I don't think the cartoon was out yet either, but the comics did exist, so they could.
Those 4 characters were incredibly disappointing to me, and when they killed off, when they facial issue guy,
facial like Beast Man, when he got blood on him, or the lizard guy when Skeletor zapped him.
Yeah, when they zap him, I was like, God, get rid of all of them. They're all terrible. I don't want to see them anymore. Couldn't even stand looking at that lizard guy at all. And the perm, these characters were so disappointing to me. And
I can see why. Again, for me, like it's that view. So I was 5 years old in 1987. My grandmother, who we called Nanny, took myself and my brothers to see this movie. It was a big deal. We all went and saw it, and it had a huge impact on me as a 5-year-old. Seeing this movie, I was like, I'd seen He-Man. I knew of He-Man. I played with the toys. I'd seen the cartoon, but my impression of what He-Man was probably wasn't fully set. So that for me, this movie, as much as those other things, other than the toys, helped determine this is what He-Man is. The toys are number one in terms of determining it. Like, as I mentioned, as a creator, I always think back to, and this is the reason I surround myself with these things, because it helps inspire me. The first stories I would tell were with action figures. At Christmas time, I would go shopping with my mom for my presents. I would know which figures I had, and I would set up this elaborate story that would last from like August. My mom used to do layaway, so you should put it on layaway until December when I get the presents. And it would be an adventure where this X-Men character or whatever, He-Man, would have to rescue his friends who were frozen. And that was what the culmination of the storyline on Christmas morning was, him freeing his friends from the ice. But of course, bad guys got freed too. So a whole new story would then begin. That was how I did that for several years in my childhood. I have these storylines for toys that I was about to play with. And the toys were literally the first storytelling tools that I had. So those had a stronger influence in terms of what He-Man was than anything. And part of it, I think, as a fan of He-Man, it's here. It's mostly here. Even when I see the cartoon, there's times where I see the cartoon and watch it back, I'm like, whoa, that's weird and trippy. I don't remember that. Like I watched an episode recently where it's like Moms from Earth, and I had no recollection of that. Like, they tell her backstory in this episode, things like that. There's so many, and the show is awesome in its own right, and weird and wacky things. But my version of He-Man was probably a little bit more akin to like Conan the Barbarian, which, if you read the early He-Man mini comics, it was a lot more in that vein. It was much darker, and then it became, the Filmation show really brightened it, and then that's what kind of had the influence. So then you have the movie, who's this wholly other thing that came along. So I think that's where I was. So for me, this is He-Man as much as those other things, aside from the action figures. I also want to say, while I'm talking about reminiscing about going to the theater, this and Neverending Story are two of my earliest film going memories. And they're both also two of the scariest things I ever remember seeing in a theater. The part in Neverending Story when he encounters, it's not the Nothing, but it's like that wolf creature that is sort of the emissary for the Nothing. When he's talking in that cave and he's like, you're just all doomed. That terrified me beyond belief. And then the sequence in this movie where they're attacking her in the gym, when they're chasing her, the way the music is, the tension to the music there, and the way the fire happens, and she's running and she can't get out, and she gets trapped under the stage and they're being stabbed. That scared me so much that when I watched it, I still like, it's that post-traumatic stress or something where I flash back to me as a kid, remembering that moment and how that made me feel. And I remember having nightmares. I wasn't one prone to nightmares about things I saw. I watched a lot of things that were, I remember right around the same age, I watched Predator, because I'm related. I'm a distant cousin, as Brian knows, to Shane Black, who's screenwriter who was in Predator. I was allowed to watch it because he was in it, but I watched the uncensored version of it. And that didn't faze me. But this moment in this film, I had nightmares about Beastman coming, and Beastman, and like when she puts it on his face and he's like, snarling and stuff. So for me, that's the impact of that character. So it's a different window. It's hard for me to have the objective view. It's very subjective to me as a 5-year-old in that moment being afraid. So
by the time I'd seen this movie, I was already probably had seen Cobra 3 or 4 times. So
like right, the hatchets.
Somebody coming into the school after her, I had already seen serial killer with the
No, totally true. Yeah, in context, like, oh, this sequence had been done in 12 other movies.
Yeah,
but that was the first
in
one
a much
for me.
scarier way. And I had seen Commando, and I had seen Death Wish already, and so maybe this was just too light for me by the time it came out, and I just went back to watching like these super intense movies I shouldn't have been watching with my dad. We can't ignore the fact that Strickland shows up.
Oh yeah, like
I mean, this is one of the highlights of the movie for me. And then not only is he the exact same character, but just with a different type of job, they at some point they give him a shotgun.
Yes.
I wanted him to say he led slackers. They did everything to emulate it except for that. And so I wonder, and maybe you know, was this a character actor who only could play himself? Or were they like, you know, that character you played, we like him. Give us that.
I feel like it's the former, because what else have you seen him in where he's not a version of that?
I don't know. What else was he in?
Yeah. Not even 100% sure, but I feel like anytime you see him, that's him. This is the most extreme take on that, but
he jumped into this movie right from that movie. They were like, Principal Strickland, I'm sorry to let you know, we're going to let you go. And he's like, you know, the police department has been calling me, asking me if I wanted to come over and work for them. So he went from Hill Valley over to Whittier and joined the force. He
was in Top Gun. He was in War Games. And if you think of those movies, again, those are very Top Gun. He's one of the commandery people. He was even in the Top Gun video game, actually, that came out like on the PlayStation, like 10 or so years after the movie, where he basically played that character again. So yeah, Boiling Point, a lot of cop movies, Hang Fire, Dick Tracy, I didn't realize he was in that. But a lot of those, the rules, if you're just looking at the title of True Blood, but not the later True Blood, this is 1989 detective type True Blood, Split Decisions, things like that, Viper, movies like that where he's Colonel. Like, I wonder, without like looking it up right now, if he is like R. Lee Emery was, you know, for ex-military, and that's how he became an actor. He was the consultant on Full Metal Jacket, and he was better than the guy that they had cast, and then just eventually
he has a career of playing that character.
Exactly. It feels like the same thing, just glancing at it, because when I think about the things I have seen him in, like Top Gun, that stands out, and a few other cop type movies, that he's that guy. Although like this one, though, like you said, the shotgun and all those things, it's
today's modern cinema, though, I think has a lot more scrutiny, and I think that the casting directors are under more pressure to not just grab the exact same person to play that same role again. If you're trying to make something quality, you know, maybe less so in like procedural television or something. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that guy is a great
you know, that guy can do
guy
it.
At the motel, who's the motel owner, who cares?
Yeah.
But if you're trying to make a nice film, you might go against cast more, you know, to make it special. Strickland.
No, exactly. It's funny watching it. I think his character's name's Lubbock or something. So, like, but
it's Strickland.
But he is, regardless of what his name is, it's totally exactly the same. Whereas I think his thing is the version of that character. I don't think there's much beyond that. Just again, reading over those credits and the titles of those movies where he's always Colonel this, Captain that. He's always in some kind of aggressive authority figure. That's him. But this is the exact same characterization. There's no nuance to it whatsoever. But the best part of his character, he then just, I'm going to stay in Eternia, which is
okay. I love it here.
Like,
and then, like, great
he has like his hot young Eternia wife.
Yeah, you could just objectify women.
Where did
They've
she
got
come from?
I'm
Yeah.
staying here. The women are great. I'm not going back to work in the school. McFly's there. He's always late. Do you think that this franchise could exist now in a origin story format where we have a movie to kick it all off, and then you have Beastman story, you have Trapjaw story? I feel like these characters are so cool. They could each get a movie.
I can see that happening simply because that's the thing now in movies where it's like, let's do Snake Eye Origins, this guy Origins, Wolverine Origins, whereas this was the 80s derivative. They could make this as the modern derivative. I would hope that they wouldn't, because they could, though. There's really interesting characters there, because I want to see, I guess before you mess around with that, can we just get a good He-Man movie?
Right.
Then we can backtrack and make all the prequels.
I'll take anything.
Yeah, but I want He-Man first. I want a good He-Man movie before we make a okay or good or even great Trapjaw movie.
I mean, what a title.
The Manny Faces trilogy, it was awesome, but Triclops part 1, 2, 3, and 4. But I think we need that first.
We do. Who would you cast as He-Man?
Well, they cast someone, and they haven't said he's not someone. I was going to say Jesse Centeno, who was a buddy of ours, but
no, he wouldn't be good.
No, the actor's name is Centeno. His last name is Centeno. So that was cast in the role of He-Man.
Is there a movie coming?
Supposedly again, but it's always been, we talked about this on our preamble piece, that on this version it'll be shorter. There is a separate video where Bryan and I has full conversation, about 20 minutes long. On this video, it'll only be about five minutes. So there's a longer version where we talk a bit about those things, but the development of it went basically, I mean, obviously now when you think about it, since this movie came out, they tried to make a sequel for the first probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then there was a big gap. And then in the mid 2000s, since then, it's been developing.
They need to make it soon. I mean, they need to capitalize. We're the age now to have expendable income to, as adults, dive back into He-Man. I mean, it's perfect.
Like this. I mean, I have Dolph here. This is a modern action figure. This is not, they never made this version of Dolph Lundgren at the time. So this is a Super 7 modern version. So as we kind of like gear to wrap things up, I do want to talk about we began with the beginning of this movie. Let's talk about the conclusion of this film. So the film, it ends in a weirdly backlit action fight with God Skeletor versus He-Man, and this giant set that we talked about at the beginning that they don't even really utilize for the fight. And the reason for that was apparently a few days before the end of shooting, the production company, Menachem Golan and Golan Globus Canon Films, pulled their funding because they didn't like how things were going. They were having some serious financial issues at the time. They pulled their funding and they were basically, this film is done, even though it was like 3 days from being complete or something. I don't know exactly how many days. So the director plus a few of the actors got together to just essentially film that without proper lighting because they couldn't do everything. That's why it has that weird backlight. That's why that final fight looks the way it does. They had choreographed something much more elaborate, but the bottom fell out of the movie, and they saved that for the end, for probably because I assume maybe they would destroy some of the set, which I think they did little bits where like pillars came down. I kind of assume
one of them.
Yeah. But you assume that more stuff would happen. And again, that's the kind of thing where you didn't get enough of that stuff from He-Man, where these great feats of strength.
We come to the feats of strength.
That was like the one and only time.
There was no feat of strength.
That was it.
There was the pillar.
That was the one pillar. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should, and maybe even that, like to something at the beginning, like tease that somehow, that he does something that is a little bit smaller, but it's challenging for him. So then that moment means more. But there was nothing like that in this movie. So what do you think of the dramatic conclusion of this film?
Well, I think leading up to the conclusion, we talked about Christina Pickles. Who was Christina Pickles? Christina Pickles was a sorceress, and we find out that basically It's perfect. Skeletor has been brining her the entire movie, and she's becoming a pickle. She was so beautiful at the beginning, and slowly she's been being brined. I mean, it was amazing when I realized
It was. Wow, the movie is so meta.
Yeah, how that all worked together. And then I have to say that red lasso whip that we saw in Eternia, that was cool.
That was pretty cool.
I love that.
And as cool as it was, though, it's just a whippy lightsaber.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I love it. I can't reach him where I'm sitting, but that's Blade. That's like the modern version, like these guys too. That's the modern version of Blade. He is one of the figures that did get released in the 80s, though. So there is like a 1987 version of Blade, the knife sword guy. So he with that whip. Yeah, I like that too. But again, it's also.
And the one that'll be missing from your house the day after I come to visit next time.
What happened to my little laser whip thing?
The whip, and I think the props throughout were fantastic. I actually thought the props were terrific.
And with that, props to William Stout, as we mentioned, who was the art director, production designer on this film, who did a lot of the design work on that. Like, as much as I'm in our little preamble, Brian mentioned didn't like the idea that He-Man had a gun. He-Man's gun is cool looking.
Yeah, everything looks so cool for the props. I wrote down the key, the scanner.
The key is awesome too.
The bucket of chicken looked perfect.
And even that restaurant set, that's it doesn't belong in a He-Man movie. But
the collar of truth was a little like they ran out of time on that, but the hologram serving dish that they presented was super cool.
Use of holograms again was cool. Like, I loved at the beginning giant Skeletor over the Eternia landscape, which we didn't mention. Those kind of things. And there's these little nuggets in this movie that hidden within this movie is the movie that they wanted to make but couldn't make. If they would have made a 25-minute movie, it would have probably been like the episode of the show length. It would have been perfect.
Yeah,
if they would put all the money into that. But
so as we get into Eternia at the end, the sword lock idea was really neat. And I thought that was executed pretty well. And Skeletor's staff is like, they were like, what is the most important prop here? It's the staff and the sword.
Yeah.
And they focused on those, and they got those pretty darn cool. As we go into the end, and all of a sudden we get gold spray paint can Skeletor, I'm like, I had mixed feelings
Kirby
about
got Skeletor.
Yeah,
but it's just awesome that it exists as a toy.
Yeah, it was so over the top, but also just so like it's a bunch of gold spray paint, But I admire what they try to do, and that they were trying to up the game for this ending. But again, even as we're talking, I can't remember what He-Man did in any of these scenes. Yeah. I can only remember what Skeletor did. And, again, that's the issue. But new helmet Skeletor was just really, it was something. And that's what you needed. They did something big. It was a little weak at the end, like after all this big stuff. And
yeah, so they raised the stakes with he's got the power of the universe and all this stuff. He's the master of the universe. And then they can't pull it off in any way that's interesting. So
although that ending where it was settled down, I mean, there is a precedent for that in the TV show where they would have their like laughing moments after.
Yeah, totally.
It was all, we're all so happy now. Did you know, I'm fairly certain that as Skeletor is falling and screaming, that his mouth is closed.
Probably.
Yeah.
That effect doesn't hold up really well. The
Die Hard ending.
Yeah, exactly. But with less money put into that special effect.
It was a matte painting that he was.
The interesting thing about this movie is if you watch the whole way through the end of the credits, there's a post-credit sequence. before Marvel was doing the first movie that I know of that had
I
this.
gotta cue that up.
You gotta watch it. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. Those of you who know
what it is.
Those of you who know, but Bryan will watch it because I'm not gonna spoil it. We'll save that for him. And whenever eventually Bryan's gonna come on for another movie, maybe a movie that we both, maybe a movie he loves and I hate.
That's
and
great.
We'll do a little snippet on that piece. But any final thoughts? Because I'm at 2% battery and I'm not plugged in right now.
Final thoughts. Wish Adam was in the movie. No Cringer or Battle Cat. Kind of disappointed about that, but I don't know how they would have pulled that off. But you know, it is a movie of omissions. And when your omissions shine brighter than what you have in it, that's kind of, you know, when you have a problem. But I do think it has crossed over into a movie where if it happened to come on TV now, I'm gonna get hooked in.
All right, we've elevated from turn the TV off, I'm just gonna go to sleep, to I'll watch it and fall asleep. So with that, I want to say thank you so much to Bryan for joining me. This has been awesome to just talk about a movie with a very good friend and launch this new podcast format, video on YouTube here and audio on podcast places. That's a little bit new to me, but thank you so much to Bryan again. I really appreciate it. Appreciate his years of friendship and his hour of talking. And thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. Follow me on the podcast stuff. Thank you to everyone who took a moment to listen to this. And as I said, see me at PowerCon, where I'll have my family in action card form. It's all messy in my hand now. Thank you again. And that's it.
And good journey.
Little tear right there for that.
I'll be back.
Hi, and welcome to Josiah is Right. So I am here at PowerCon, and I'm going to recap what's been an awesome show here at PowerCon promoting Josiah is Right and my comic collage artwork, which is over here. So I'm sharing space with myself as comic collage, and over here as Josiah is Right. So I've been giving out my trading cards, which you see here, and selling some collages. So I'm going to recap the events of the show for me. So I saw many things at PowerCon. We'll start with many faces. And I just want to show you guys some highlights. I am now in the comfort and quiet of my home. My kids are asleep, so it's quiet. And we'll start off with, you can see my space and my collage work. And my neighbors were cool enough to let me use, they had racks for their toy display. So they're fortunate, or I was fortunate that they let me hang stuff up there, because it's hard to display that stuff, and it's all on the table you see here, and it looks okay on the table, but it definitely looks better up. This is from later in the show when some things had sold, so it kind of displayed a little bit differently, but you can just see what I had left, and some of this sold. Did really well in sales in terms of my collages on Saturday. Not as good Sunday, but Sunday was still really fun, and Sunday was kind of more of a day to focus on the Josiah is Right side and promoting that, and I just kind of gave out cards to people and got to meet people. I gave that card to Super 7, the me trading card, which depicts me wearing one of their sweatshirts, which is hilarious because I didn't even realize it until the guy pointed it out. But I was wearing the shirt that was on the card. Now, I knew I was wearing the shirt and I knew it was on the card, but it just wasn't in my brain at that moment. It was in the morning. If I can cover my overhead, that's great. But it's not really about, again, this is the neighbors that let me use their side. Just to the right of where that Mum Run, those Thundercats toys are, is where my stuff kind of starts. And so we'll go through some of the highlights here. There's William Stout. He was awesome enough to sign one of my collages, a He-Man one, and also I got a book from him that was signed, and a couple of prints from his design for the film. And I'll go through that stuff in another video, so if you are into the collecting aspect and the art, please make sure you check out my collecting video. So that was him on Sunday. I believe I shot that footage, and then we're going to cut to him on... No, that was Saturday. This would be Sunday, I believe, when I bought the book from him. Or maybe I bought it Saturday. I don't know which day I bought from. Regardless, it was one day versus the other where he actually did a sketch inside the book for me, and that sketch took him all of 2 minutes. And I'll tell the story in more detail as to why, but he drew Godzilla for me, which is pretty awesome. And they're Super 7, and I don't have a shot of it, unfortunately, but in the background you can see the display there, which is where they had the Mumra, which I have coming to me. I'm super excited about that figure. To go great with a Lion-O. They didn't really have a ton of that. It wasn't up close on display. It was obviously on display, but further in the back, so I didn't get a good shot of it. And here we have Mattel, and man, this stuff looked great. I wasn't sure about the Revelations line until I saw this stuff. That's like the Mega Constructs, until I saw this stuff here in this display. It looks great. I guess I've seen the stuff that's already been released, and in the box, it doesn't look as cool to me because those boxes, it kind of hides the figures. I don't know. So, and then some more great looking Origin stuff. I'm not really into collecting that, but I definitely could in it. I do want to get a few of those Revelations figures now, having seen them at PowerCon, and the stuff for the new Netflix show, which I'm excited to get to watch and share with Penny, see what she thinks. And this one is He-Man of the Master Universe, so it's fun. It seems like it'll be fun. And then, of course, the big highlight was the Sunman figure, which looks amazing. That packaging is great. Such a cool story behind that figure. If you don't know it, go look into it. The unlicensed, essentially black He-Man, and it's cool that he is now officially part of the Master Universe. And then here we just have a bit of the floor. You can see the custom action figures and stuff. Here we have the Four Horsemen booth. If you look there, these are amazing. That one in particular, it's some kind of space slug creature. This is for what they're calling Cosmic Legions. I'm really, really impressed by that figure. I'm always impressed by their stuff. I don't collect it, but that figure in particular makes me want to collect. I love the massive figures in general. Like, I love Juggernaut, I love Colossus, all the big guys. I have my HasLab Sentinel coming, hopefully very soon, but that's really what grabs me. And we see some random toy bins, super fun at any show, especially PowerCon, with a lot of He-Man toys in there. Mighty Maniacs, these are really cool small figures that look great. They're Master Universe inspired sets. I didn't get any of those. I actually had wanted to and then forgot until pretty much right now watching this footage, but there's a lot of things like that on the show floor that I wanted to get and didn't. But you can only spend so much money, so you got to make some choices. Speaking of making some choices, one I kind of sort of regret, but not really, is not getting anything from Mondo. So my buddy Paul, who helped me out, he did get in line and ended up with a Faker. They had sold out a Skeletor. They had some like stuff left over from previous shows, but their stuff, it is amazing. It's really cool. The 6 scale I don't collect because it's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. And I like that 6-inch figure. It looks really cool on my shelf. So I don't want to jump to a bigger size, but these just look amazing. And the Hordak in particular, that was a pre-order there, and I know they did it online after the show. It looks absolutely amazing. And here you will see Factory Entertainment, and these these replica weapons looked really amazing. I'm sorry I didn't get a better shot there as I just kind of continue strolling. Again, this is the last aisle of the floor, so again, a small convention. Well, actually, there's actually an outer hallway that I didn't get to spend that much time at, and I think I did pick up some footage of it for you guys. But at the end here, you see toy collectors, toy vendors, and at the end on this sort of little row was a lot of the animation guys. So I got a lot of signatures from these guys on a He-Man figure, and there's a Ghostbusters Firehouse. Definitely, that's something that's on the list of one to add to my collection. But you see some of the animation guys there. I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but hey, that's actually Pixel Dan, and that's Michael Swan again, assuming I'm saying it correctly. And you can see this is that outer hall when you see She-Ra and Hordak, and this was kind of like, I hope the vendors here did well, and I hope that the people were able to find them. But for me, it was kind of out because I didn't want to leave my booth for too much, and this felt like I was leaving the floor. If I did go to the bathroom was over in this area. I did go. The last time this outer hallway was an outer hallway, it was just like a lobby section. So, and there's my buddy Patrick's art. I didn't get to get anything from him this year. I think I'm going to pick up a Battle Cat, maybe the He-Man and Battle Cat at the top. But Patrick, if you're listening to this, I want that and my Mega Man with a beard sketch. So I'll leave it at that. So that was my recap PowerCon, thank you guys, it's been awesome. Thank you to everyone who newly subscribed to this channel by coming to this show. It means a lot. It was really great to meet a lot of cool people. I love this show. If I didn't vend here, I would just come to this show as a guest. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye. Many artists toil alone in the dark. In that isolation, they battle with themselves to make art. Occasionally, that art finds its way into the world. But what if that artist doesn't get his or her due credit? These walls, all these toys, it's all art. Every single one of these toys was created by an artist. I still don't know who most of them are, but it is one of the great and truest honors of my life to say I met, at least briefly, Mark Taylor, the greatest of them. I didn't really know Mark Taylor, although I was fortunate to meet him and spend time in conversation with him. It remains one of the best days of my life. It actually reminds me of the scene in Gladiator where Proximo, played by Oliver Reed, talks to Maximus, played by Russell Crowe, about meeting Marcus Aurelius. Maximus kind of mocks him for having known Marcus Aurelius. Proximo takes offense to this because that meeting, as brief as it was, completely changed his life as it earned him his freedom. That's Mark Taylor for me. And his impact extends beyond the conversations we had over a weekend at PowerCon. It goes back pretty much as long as I've been alive, even longer. I was born in 1982, so I've pretty much existed as long as He-Man and Skeletor. While I remember the cartoon, I don't remember it well. But I remember hours upon hours with these toys in my hands. It's as if I was given the tools by a great artist and told, go make a story, kid. And that's where I first learned to tell stories, by playing with these action figures, these very ones in my hand right now. Mark created He-Man, arguably the definitive toy line of the 1980s. And he helped bring focus and general awesomeness to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, arguably the definitive toy line of the 1990s. One of the jewels of my collection is this Jumbo He-Man. I took it to the last PowerCon and actually had a lot of people related to He-Man in the 1980s sign it, which is awesome, and I'm not a signature collector. But one thing that makes me sad is that Mark didn't sign it. Not because anything related to value, but because if there's one signature that should be on this toy, it's his. At PowerCon 2019, I gave Mark a copy of my short story book. I told him about my meeting with Ray Bradbury, a story I love to tell, but that's a story for another day. And of course, Mark had a better one. I want to preface this by saying I'm telling this story from memory, and unfortunately, the man who should be telling this story is no longer with us. But the meeting of two of my greatest creative influences is a story that should be told, and it goes as such. Ray Bradbury came one day to Mattel to explore how toys are made. In my mind, it's almost as if Dr. Seuss is visiting Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. He wandered into Mark's office. Whether he was told to go there or drawn by the aura of the art within, I don't know. Upon arriving, he said something to the effect of, "I understand magic is made here." Mark, not unlike Proximo, took offense to this. Yes, he knew exactly who he was talking to and respected the man's work. However, he didn't care who he was. You don't come into his world and insult him. That's not cool. Mark shot back. Are your stories magic? Do they just appear, conjured instantly out of nothing? Ray replied, of course not. They come from toil hunched over a typewriter. Mark said, it's the same here. There's no magic here. Just irons in the fire and lots of hard work. There is, however, magic here. Because of all that hard work, we get to experience the magic. The magic is very real. It's just magic that's the result of work by people we don't name often enough.
You remember this one.
There's a song called Story of an Artist by Daniel Johnston that's been playing over and over in my head since Mark's passing, and I'm not sure if it fits completely, but it's in my heart for this moment, so here it is. Listen up and I'll tell a story about an artist growing old. Some would try for fame and glory. Others aren't so bold. Everyone in friends and family saying, hey, get a job. Why do you do that only? Why are you so odd? We don't really like what you do. We don't think anyone ever will. It's a problem that you have, and this problem's made you ill. Listen up and I'll tell a story about an artist growing old. Some would try for fame and glory. Others just like to watch the world. Thank you for everything, Mark. It was a pleasure meeting you, but more than anything, thank you for your creativity. Rest in peace, sir.